Leila Pahlavi was a princess of Iran and the youngest daughter of the last emperor and empress of Iran, who fled the country in 1979 after the Islamic Revolution. Leila could have had a wonderful future, but she died at 31. What caused her death and how was her life? Keep watching the WOW channel. Iran said goodbye to the monarchy in 1979 when the Islamic Revolution occurred in the country. Today, many Iranians still remember this time with sadness. Then the country had more freedoms. Women could wear European clothes and get an education. The last Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was a controversial figure in history. Some considered him a tyrant, and some considered him a great politician, thanks to whom the country flourished. One thing is hard to argue with. Iran's royal family was truly attractive. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was married 3 times. His first 2 marriages were unsuccessful as the wives could not bear him a male heir, and only the 3rd marriage with an Iranian girl from the noble family, Farah Diba, was the most successful and happy. In this marriage they raised 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. The youngest of them was Princess Leila, whom we will talk about today. Princess Leila Pahlavi was born in 1970. She grew up with her brothers and sister in a huge palace and bathed in luxury. However, the girl's upbringing was mainly carried out by nannies and governesses, since her parents were too passionate about government affairs. Her father, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, declared himself emperor in 1967 and appointed his wife Farah as regent. This meant that she would have to take over the rule of the country in the event of the death of the emperor until their oldest son turned 21 years old. Farah Pahlavi devoted much more time to her work in the palace than to motherhood. She was called the working empress because she worked from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and also traveled a lot around the country. Little Princess Leila apparently rarely saw her mother. However, she always remembered her childhood as a happy time. The girl could come to her parents' office at any time and sit on their laps. Despite being very busy, mom and dad adored their daughter. Leila also had her own petting zoo and many classmates. She studied at school where mainly the children of Iran's elite were gathered. All her classmates came from good families who were friends with the Shah. It seemed that this girl had a wonderful future ahead of her, but at the end of the 70s, the political situation in Iran began to deteriorate. Ordinary residents were dissatisfied with the rule of the Shah, who was an authoritarian leader and spent lavishly huge amounts of money from the state treasury, while many people lived in poverty. Therefore, in 1979, a revolution took place in Iran and Islamists came to power. The Shah of Iran and his wife had to flee to Egypt, and 9-year-old Princess Leila was sent to Texas, where her older brother Reza Pahlavi was training to become a pilot. From that moment, little Leila's life changed completely. She said goodbye to her childhood in the Iranian palace forever. The next few months were a real nightmare for the family. They had to move from one country to another, as the new Iranian authorities demanded their extradition and execution. The Pahlavi family feared for their lives, and the overthrown Shah was by that time seriously ill with cancer. For little Leila, such a life was a big shock. Many eyewitnesses recall that in those days the princess often cried and called for her parents, who had to wander around the world in search of refuge. At the same time, Leila and her siblings never needed money. The royal family had over $100 million in offshore accounts abroad and continued to live in wealth. A year after fleeing Iran, the Shah died after a serious illness. His funeral took place in Egypt. The whole family saw him off on his last journey. At the funeral, Princess Leila was the only one wearing a white dress. It was a great loss for the 10-year-old girl, but she tried to stay calm and strong. The last memory I have of him is the most painful, the princess told a French magazine in 1999. When I understood the end was near, they would not let me enter his room. For a long time I had the feeling I had betrayed him by my absence. In another interview she talks about the Shah as the love of her life. After the death of the Shah, the family moved to the United States. There, the children received local education, and Leila changed several schools. At the Ivy League Brown University, Rhode Island, the princess studied literature, German, and Scandinavian philosophy. In addition to her native Persian, she spoke fluent English, French, and Farsi. She also learned some Italian and Spanish. According to some sources, she left education early. According to others, she graduated at the age of 22. Already while studying at the university, Leila Pahlavi began to complain of frequent fatigue and abdominal pain. But at the same time, she was a sweet and kind girl. Everybody says the same thing about Leila Pahlavi, a wonderful girl, deeply kind, fantastically sensitive. No one says a bad thing about her, other than she was a little withdrawn and tended not to talk much. Friends said that she never shouted, did not argue, did not make scandals. She was always an angel, very sweet, very sensitive, very dutiful. I never heard her arguing with anyone, least of all her mother. She would always do what she was asked, even if she did not want to, said one family friend. Despite the loss of royal titles and exile from the country, the Pahlavi family continued to live richly, and Leila never had to struggle to earn a living like ordinary people. She helped her brother run the Mihan Foundation, an Iranian cultural organization dedicated to building links between Iran and the West. She also loved poetry and translated the poems of Persian poet Rumi into English and Spanish. Her lifestyle was modest and calm. She often attended social events and art gallery openings. Like a real aristocrat, she went skiing to Switzerland, visited museums, and traveled a lot around the world. Princess Leila was a very beautiful and charming girl. It is not surprising that designer Valentino invited her to become a model for his brand. However, beauty did not bring her happiness and love at all. Leila had several fleeting affairs, but she never married or had children. In addition, the princess had low self-esteem and suffered from an eating disorder. It is known that she had anorexia neurosis. Leila always thought that she was too fat and needed to lose even more weight. When the girl was 20 years old, she lost a lot of weight and told everyone that she suffered from headaches, muscles, and joint pain. Once, at a ceremony in Cairo in honor of the 20th anniversary of her father's death, Leila complained to a friend that she was overweight, but in reality her figure was excellent. Perhaps she was badly influenced by the modeling industry, where girls are expected to be extremely thin. Because of this, Leila Pahlavi was severely depressed, but nevertheless she had many plans in life and understood that she had many opportunities. She once said in an interview, "These days I have to take my life seriously. Many different avenues are open for me, but I struggle to concentrate on one alone. Quite a few people can't see that behind my title I am still a woman who can love. I know that it is not easy to find an ideal companion, especially as I have the example of an exceptional father and two brilliant brothers always before me." However, mental illness took over her mind. She found it increasingly difficult to cope with depression and anorexia. Therefore, several times concerned relatives had to admit her to a rehabilitation clinic. However, even expensive treatment under the supervision of the best doctors did not help her. When Leila's beloved grandmother died, the girl fell into even greater depression. She refused to eat and looked exhausted. It is known that for many years the girl was dependent on antidepressants, painkillers, and drugs. Illegal substances made her life unbearable. She needed increasingly larger dosages, and the addiction became stronger. Before her death, she also often complained of pain and insomnia. Leila consulted doctors about this, and during one of these visits she stole prescriptions for sleeping pills from the doctor's desk. When Leila was 31, she wanted to move from New York to London and start a business exhibiting Persian art. However, she failed to carry out her plans. A couple of months later, she was found dead in a London hotel in 2001. She was lying in bed as if she had just fallen asleep and was covered with a blanket. A large dosage of prohibited substances was found in her blood. Next to her were illegal substances, pills, and in a desk drawer was a family photograph of the Shah, her mother, and siblings while watching television in a palace in Tehran. In this photo, little Leila was sitting on her father's lap. This was probably her most favorite and touching memory. All her adult life she was sad about her former life in the palace in Iran and could not come to terms with the loss of her homeland. This was probably the main reason for her constant melancholy and sadness. There was nothing to indicate that the princess wanted to take her own life. She had so many plans and dreams. She probably just could not cope with her emotions and took the wrong dosage. For the past few years, Leila has been very depressed, said her mother. Time had not healed her wounds. Exiled at the age of 9, she never surmounted the death of her father, His Majesty Mohammed Reza Shah Pahlavi, to whom she was particularly close. Queen Farah added her daughter had never forgotten the injustice and the dramatic condition of her departure, and that she could not stand living far from Iran and shared wholeheartedly the suffering of her countrymen. Leila Pahlavi was buried in a cemetery in Paris next to her beloved grandmother, and 10 years later her brother Ali Reza Pahlavi died, who was also buried next to her. Just imagine what a grief it was for their mother to bury 2 children. However, Farah Pahlavi pulled herself together for the sake of her 2 other children and several grandchildren. Today, Farah Pahlavi is 85 years old. For 22 years now, every year she has been visiting her daughter Leila's grave in Paris and remembering their happy days in Tehran. Leila Pahlavi seemed to have everything one could dream of: beauty, money, opportunities, the love of family and friends. However, before death and addiction, all people are equal, regardless of social status. Today, Leila could be 53 years old, but for everyone she will remain young and beautiful forever. Thanks for watching. Remember to share your thoughts with me, click like and subscribe. See you next time.